Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we are looking at Jeremiah 14 to 17. There's a few things to unpack here. We get to find out what happens to Jeremiah after he rediscovered his underwear from the Euphrates River. If you think I'm lying, go check out yesterday's episode. As we read over these couple of chapters, there's still a lot of judgment. There is some protection for Jeremiah, and then there seems to be some random thoughts about the Sabbath that are not, in fact, random, I don't think. So as we go over these things, what do you want to talk about today, Jenny?
Well, it feels random because it's just like we're talking about the sin of all these places and how the Lord's going to judge, and then boom, keep the Sabbath day holy. Like,
Yeah.
my first question as soon as we were done reading was like, why are they going to care? Like, they're not doing anything else. Why are they going to care about keeping the Sabbath day holy? Like,
Well, keep in mind they are keeping the image of worshiping God. That's one of the interesting things about this
just
time
adding
and place.
everything else.
They're adding idols from everywhere, but they're keeping the appearance of being servants of the Lord because they're
Except not, because they're not keeping the Sabbath day holy.
they're still trying to offer sacrifices. They're still trying to go in and out of the temple. They had a real high point during Josiah reading the book of Deuteronomy, most likely. So there is some bright spots in there. So they're not totally strangers of what God requires, particularly if this was written during Josiah's time, because Josiah gathered all the people together and read the book of the law.
So that was like more towards the end of the reading, and I think that was just like
Yeah.
what caught me
Yeah.
as we were reading, like, oh, that's kind of a weird little drop in. But
Yeah.
anyway, going back to the beginning of the reading today, chapter 14 is just, again, talking about the types of judgment that will fall on the people. The Lord is like, it's interesting because he, like, definitely, from the words of Jeremiah, I guess this is in chapter 15, but God is, he's done. I was describing it earlier as like, this is just like gloves off. God's over it.
He's like
I've given you
out.
so many opportunities. And chapter 15, verse 6, at the end it says, I am weary of relenting. So he's like, he's done giving those like second, third, fourth, fifth, 20th chances. And I feel like even in our own lives, like discipling or walking alongside people, or even just like with each other sometimes, like with our own kids, it just feels like, oh, I feel that tension, and I know it's like not the same at all. But I feel that tension of like, I am so sick of giving you like 50 chances every time we have to deal with said issue. And like, I think it makes God relatable in a way because he's not just like this great big war hungering, like crazy person.
Definitely not.
But he does have those moments of like, hey, I have given you so many chances and you are going to have consequences for it.
So what we're experiencing here is the long-suffering nature of God. So God is righteous, he is just, he is long-suffering. So he has given these people as a people a significant period of time. We're talking hundreds, if not 1,000 years, because when they come into the promised land, all the way back with Moses and Joshua a long time ago, he tells them, like, you need to be obedient, and I will bless you if you bless me, and I will curse you if you've cursed me. And the overwhelming story of his people is that they have been turned against him. And so if you look, kind of a key passage, I was thinking about this while we were reading today, a super key passage for all of this, if this is overwhelming to you or if this strikes you as odd, you need to go back to Deuteronomy 28. Because Deuteronomy 28 is a chapter that's kind of the closing of the promise that God gave to his people at the very beginning. And Deuteronomy 28 is the list of blessings that will occur if you bless God, and the list of curses that will occur if you curse God. So Israel has been in this, the people of Israel have been in this special category in the ancient world where they are living under God's blessing. And what is going to happen to them, and what is happening to them, is that God is just removing his hand of providence from them. And now they have to live in the world like everybody else lives in that world. It's very normal to suffer under famine, to suffer under drought, to suffer under wars in that day and age. Like, it's very common. But what is odd is that they haven't dealt with that to a large degree because God has been protecting them and keeping them. But now because God is long-suffering, he's reached the end of his long-suffering and it is time for punishment. And actually, to connect this directly to Jeremiah, in chapter 16, the Lord basically says, hey, you guys, like, there's going to come a generation soon where you're not even talking about me delivering you from Egypt anymore. You're going to be talking about me delivering you from the north countries, and that's going to be more important. So he's talking about, like, yeah, you were in slavery in Egypt for 400 years, but there's a time coming where you're going to be celebrating the fact that you're no longer in exile in the north country in Babylon.
Kind of going back a little bit into Jeremiah again, or Jeremiah 14 again. We are seeing a lot of the same themes over and over throughout the judgment of the people, and one is just, again, lying or deception. And chapter 14 really, this caught my eye because I think we can get really, really hooked on this very easily in our own day, in our own age. It's talking about lying prophets. That's what it's like, the little section is titled. And the verse that really stuck out to me was verse 14. It says about the people that are prophesying falsely. It says, they are prophesying to you a lying vision, worthless divination, and the deceit of their own minds. And the last part really got me, like, the deceit of your own minds. Like, that is really tricky because I think there are definitely people, myself included, that hear things from the Lord. Like if you are working really hard to be in relationship with the Lord and, like, giving the time and putting the time in, and I mean that not in, like, a tasky way, but like a very relational way, I think God does definitely speak to you in ways that are, like, indescribable, as, like, very unique and really powerful. However, I think, because this has happened to me also, I think it's very easy to get into a place where you just, like, start thinking about your own thoughts and, like, putting those thoughts into a God's voice kind of, like, section of your mind and deceive even your own self. And then also other people, if you start just, like, throwing that out there to people, like, oh, it almost sounds like very, what are those people called? Like the ones that
Like fortune
read
tellers
your
or
palms
something?
and stuff, like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm thinking
Yeah.
about this. And does that line up with what you're thinking? Like, it's like super questioning, like, well, I think this is what God said. Like, no, I'm pretty sure that when I hear the Lord, like, this is what he's saying. And that's happened to us even, like, a couple of times where it's like, hey, this is what God said. And it's pretty crazy. And, like, you have also, like, whoa, that's crazy, because I definitely heard the same thing.
There's oftentimes significant alignment. I think that's a huge topic. We could do, like, a whole podcast series on hearing the word of the Lord, the voice of the Lord. To set this in context, I think will help us. The prophets of Judah at this time, they are seeing the idolatry all around them. So they are aware that the rich people are getting richer. They're taking advantage of the poor people. They are aware that people are worshiping Baal, that people are sacrificing their sons to, like, other gods. They're aware that there's nonsense going on, and yet they are proclaiming peace and prosperity to the people. So the prophets, the lying prophets, like, many times we've read a little section where the prophets are proclaiming peace, peace.
Or it says, I did not send, the Lord saying this, I did not send them, the ones who say sword and famine shall not come upon this land. Basically, like, denying anything that Jeremiah says.
And if you go back to Deuteronomy 28, you can see the Lord has already said, if you do not obey me and worship me and me alone, I, the Lord, am God. I am one. You don't worship other gods. If you don't do what I told you to do, you will come under judgment and sword and famine and disease. And so these prophets could have easily tested what they believed against what God had already said in his word, because we know Josiah found it. We know Josiah proclaimed it. And they would have known that they were proclaiming a false thing. So the first step in understanding God's voice, because God does still speak to people and lead people, if you are not regularly engaged in reading his word, you have no guide to be able to know if what you're proclaiming is true and accurate or not. if you're trying to proclaim prophecy that is in no way connected to God's word and seems to be out of alignment with God's word, you are in trouble. And that is one of the reasons we are really passionate about reading all of God's word and understanding it, because it helps us understand when we're hearing God's voice, when we're hearing our own voice, and when we're being deceived. We don't want to be deceived.
So I guess that kind of, I feel like that leads into a really good your part today. What do you think?
I think so, yes. I think it does. I think one side note that I just want to mention, God also speaks to Jeremiah in these chapters and says, you're going to have a tough job, but I'm going to protect you. And because I'm going to protect you, no one is going to destroy you. So
he refers to him as a bronze, wait for it.
A bronze wall.
Fortified wall of bronze, yes.
So
they're going to fight against you, but they won't prevail over you.
Just within these chapters, if you're uncomfortable with the judgment and the punishment, like, here we have Jeremiah being faithful to God, and God is proclaiming, I will be faithful to you. I will protect you. I will keep you. You will be safe. And so this, even in these judgment passages, you see that God is gracious and merciful to people who are obedient to him and serve him. So that's the sidebar extra credit. Back to Jenny's your part.
Well, I didn't know if you were leading out on that one, but I guess I can. So again, that the whole idea of prophecy, I think it's a really good practice to get in yourself, to be in the word constantly, and to be just like in communication with God often. Don't just come to him when it's convenient, come to him when you're in need, but come to him daily and reading his word daily to keep yourself in a place where you don't have to worry about, am I being deceived by my own thoughts? Am I being deceived by things that I just want to hear or am making up myself, or something I want people to believe about me or about whatever? But be in continual communication with the Lord, so this is not like a confusing place for you to be, or a place where, God forbid, you're being written about later of somebody who just couldn't be trusted because they're deceived by their own minds. So remember to stay in the word, stay communicating with the Lord, and really seek to hear his voice and not your own.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.